Welcome to this lecture on using the interactive image widget in iBooks Author. Now, if you have an image or a graphic where you need to provide additional detailed information about a specific part or parts of the graphic, then the interactive image is going to be perfect for you. Now, there's lots of examples where you might want to use an interactive image. So, for example, maps or technical diagrams, a screenshot of apps and software, maybe even family photos. So let's see how this is going to work in our project. So in the geography section, I have a section on the 5 boroughs, which we've already looked at before. What I want to do is add an additional interactive image to this section. So I'm actually going to go to page 11. I have some text here. I'm going to go to my widgets pop-up, and I'm going to select interactive image. Now when I do that, it drops in a placeholder interactive image widget for me that I can then move into place. So I'll just go ahead and place it over there, align it up nicely with our content. Now you'll notice that this already has a couple of labels that have been added, and then there's a placeholder here for me to add my image. So I'll go ahead and do that first. I'll go to my exercise files in folder 11. There is a folder called Widget Interactive Image. I'm just going to drag the PNG file that I have in there and drop it onto the widget. So that's the starting point for our interactive image. Of course, like every other widget in iBooks Author, if we select that widget and go to the inspector, to the widget inspector, we have the option of working through the interaction pane or the layout pane. The layout pane is very similar to the layout options that you have for other widgets, so you can again choose the way that the titles and captions and so forth are laid out on this widget. You can choose to have the title, the caption, include a background, and so forth. So the same options that we've seen elsewhere. So the first thing I'll do is just retitle this 5 boroughs. Okay, we'll go back to the interaction tab. And now you'll see that I have 3 listings under the views. So the default view is what you're going to see when you get to this page in your iBook. Second view, number 1, is the view that somebody's going to see when they click on or tap on this particular label, and that happens to be that label right there. Okay, so what I'm going to do is just move it over to here, and I'm going to call this Brooklyn. Okay, so that's Brooklyn. Okay, now what you can do is you can move the image around exactly where you want the interactive image to zoom into. You can even change the magnification if you'd like. So depending on the image that you have, the amount of detail, you may need to modify the magnification. The most important thing is you have to set your view. Okay, so when you click that, you can see that it's now grayed out. That tells me that the view that I'm looking at right now is the view that is associated with this particular label. Now I'll go to the second one, and that is what we're going to use for Manhattan. So I'll just click and drag this marker on top of number 1. I'm going to double click here to highlight the title, the label title. We'll call this Manhattan. Now if I had a description that I wanted to add here, I could certainly do that. And again, just manipulate this image, move it around, or change the magnification so you get the image that you want, and then hit the set view button. You'll notice how it's a bright blue. It means that I can actually set this view right now. Once I click that button, the button becomes grayed out and disabled. Now if I was to move it around a little bit more, you'll notice that set view becomes available to me again. So I'll just click set view again, and that's good for now. Now we still have 3 other boroughs to work on, so I can hit the plus button here at the bottom of the views list, and it'll just add a placeholder. And of course then I can move that wherever I need to. So I just need it over here in Queens. So we can again just double click Queens. Maybe I should have more of Queens showing. It's a big borough. Zoom out a little bit more and then set the view. Okay, so I can continue doing that for my other 2 boroughs. I'll do that very quickly. Now one thing you can do is you can actually move the image, drag the image to where you want the new tag to appear. So if I hit the plus button, you'll notice it appears closer to where I want it to be. So I'll just call this Staten Island. And then finally, I've got the Bronx, which is north of Manhattan. So I'll just scroll over there, and now I can just call this the Bronx. Now there's a couple of issues that I've introduced here. The first one is that this is kind of all out of order. The Bronx should be number 4, and Staten Island should be number 5. So if I want to change the order, I can simply click and drag to the new position. I get a nice little guide that tells me what I should be doing. Now the other problem that I just introduced is that I didn't set the view for the Bronx or Staten Island. If I look at Brooklyn, it looks good. If I look at Manhattan, that looks good as well. If I look at Queens, that looks good. Now the Bronx, I actually didn't set the view, but it seemed to work pretty well. I'll just go ahead and set the view again. And Staten Island, let's see what that looks like. All right, that's not bad either. So we'll keep those. And now just again to reorder them to match the numbers that I have on my image, I'm just going to make Manhattan number 1, Brooklyn, Queens, Bronx, and Staten Island. So now the other thing that I can choose here is I can choose to show the transport controls, and you'll notice that it adds these numbers along the bottom. So a user or reader can actually tap on these numbers and go to that particular item if they'd like. So that's just a navigation aid that you can choose to include. You can also say show description and sidebar. If you do that, instead of seeing the description label, which is what we're seeing here, if I was to make this option or select this option to show description in the sidebar, you'll see what happens. It actually creates this little sidebar and includes the label and the description in the sidebar instead. So it's a purely aesthetic option that you can choose. Okay, and then finally there's some accessibility description fields down at the bottom. You can choose to add additional data if you'd like. It's possible that the image that you're using is conveying some information that is not being captured by your labels or the descriptions that you're using. So you can choose to add additional information here. Okay, so let's go ahead and preview this. Okay, so there is our interactive image. We can choose to interact with this while it's on the page, or we can hit the full screen button, and you can see I can tap into any of these items and get more detailed information. I can use the transport controls along the bottom to navigate through this image as well. So really neat little widget that has tons and tons of uses when you're working in iBooks Author. And that concludes our lecture on using the interactive image widget.